So I'm going to explore Welcome to Country. This is a ritual that is ubiquitous within Australia, whether or not it's the opening of Parliament or corporate board meetings, sporting events. Everybody is familiar with this ritual. What I want to do is explore what this sanctioned, ritual ultimately conceals and what it legitimizes. And so in turn, we can read the acknowledgement as trying to contain the spiritual question of reconciliation that is always transcendent to the politics that frames it. And so in this way, we have to look at this welcome as concealing more than what it reveals. And so the easiest way that we can frame this is that if you're welcome to a country, usually the frame of reference of people are welcome to a country that they obviously already belong to, so it seems strange, but the context obviously is the traditional owners of the land. So we have to look at what traditional owners here means and connect it in reference to a buyer's journey that every single one of us, irrespective of whether or not you're First Nations or the descendants of colonizers, as it were, walks. Because if you're welcome to country, are you welcome to walk the country like the ancestors, these people that reclaim their heritage like their ancestors did? If you are welcome to a country that the only way that you can walk is as a buyer's journey, then what's offered? Right? If the welcome is in reference to, let's say, hospitality, okay? Well, hospitality is in reference to what form of hospitality? So the issue here is that it is designed to contain the question of reconciliation, we could say, that is spiritually grounded. And so it becomes sanctioned as this ritual, but there's nothing actually at play because it doesn't force people to question ultimately what would be a welcome, what would be a true welcome. And so what it does is it substitutes for that. And so we need to explore it from that angle. So, and the best way that you can do is to connect it to the Aboriginal spirituality. So if you have songlines, so that's the songlines of, say, particular peoples is just their ancestors most likely walked, or creator beings, and so therefore you have a songline that connects one place to another. And yet that songline is inextricably connected or woven into the landscape and the spirituality of the particular, say, tribes of Australia. Now, compare that to a buyer's journey. Now, if you're welcome to a country where you cannot be orientated towards a songline, but by default of the welcome, it's a buyer's journey, then ultimately what you seek is to monetize the memory of your ancestors. And if people accuse any proponent of welcome to country is just race grifting, and to a certain degree you can understand that seems kind of legitimate, but ultimately it's not looking at the issue of the ancestry that people claim in order to welcome other people in, all right, to be an act of goodwill on their part. Because if the welcome is, like I said, is in reference to what you don't question, so the use of a credit people are not the originators of, then how can it not be anything else than a buyer's journey that's been set for that welcome? And so it becomes transactional. And so if it becomes transactional, it's not in reference to the creativity that you could animate to become a co-creator or a creator being of a new dreaming. And so therefore, the way of reconciliation, if this is set up as a way to orientate, say, people towards this reconciliation, all right, to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, ultimately it substitutes for the spiritual question of it. All right, so what you do, it gets beholden to the politicization of the issue and not the spirituality that's completely jettisoned. And so let's look at the way how Aboriginal peoples would have walked through the land prior to the Europeans coming to Australia. They would have, if they're original custodians of their lands, they're not transiting their lands, they're inextricably given to it because their very sustenance was dependent upon it. And so therefore they were very much a custodian of it. And so any of the songlines, so whether or not it's connecting, say, a watering hole or water to, say, so a sacred site, as it were, or to hunting grounds, it's all connected, say, into a map of let's say of the country that they're walking, but they're never at any point are they disconnected from their ancestry. They're obviously interwoven in it and they're embedded in it. And this walking on country is obviously completely different when you're welcomed as the credit instrument that you're given as. All right, and so if we say that songlines was a way to sing the land into being, or to participate in the eternal dreaming, what dream is held out when welcome to country does not question literally the way how people walk? All right, so once again, if you step back from the ritual and the way how it gets politicized or it becomes a football, you can see that ultimately there's something there that is yet to be questioned in order for reconciliation to be taken outside the political lens that relates to spirituality. So what would be the dreaming, or to dream creation beyond the totalizing climb of a buyer's journey. And so this is why when you are welcomed to place, okay, how can you be welcomed to place when you're beholden to the no place of the market for your time? All right, so think of that. So if you're welcomed, then it's extended to you in an act of goodwill, like I said. But the no place that you're beholden to, so that unavowed utopianism, when you cannot be spatially orientated towards the market for your time, you'll be orientated towards the welcome marginally. You cannot be totally given to it, because ultimately the people that are offering the welcome are an economic agent in exactly the same way that you are. So that means to say that you look at it from that perspective. You're both in this pantomime, like something, you're creating something that you're going to walk together, and yet because the question of spirituality is completely discounted through this, you cannot overcome the claim that's made on time that makes something that's marginal compared to what would be a dream time, or a time that's indivisible. And so in reference to the spirituality of the Aboriginals and the spirituality of the indivisibility, or the way how that you animate what is without origination. And so what becomes a common dreaming or a dream time, and the way how that your actions creates a songline that would be connected to that place. And so you could say that why is it promoted so much? And there is a reason why it is promoted. So it's promoted on the part of the state and say corporations, and obviously people that are given as credit instruments, because there is a spiritual aspiration for European peoples in Australia for reconciliation, but what's offered as the avenue to achieve it is always through the Imperium. Okay, now the Imperium is not in reference to the British Empire, but the form of life of the consumer. So the Imperium is inextricably connected to the way how that we produce ourselves as credit instruments. Okay, so that framing of Imperium, it means to say that you'd be orientated towards the question of reconciliation beyond obviously the politics of the Imperium, because it comes down to you. It becomes down to your actions. And so reconciliation, if it's not driven by a question of spirituality, well then ultimately you are setting up a way where it's given as a value add to the buyer's journey that's been set for it. And this is what disarms it. So if you disarm reconciliation through the way how it gets presented, then you're not dealing with the way how that you could animate, say, become part of a common dreaming of the peoples of Australia, where you create, obviously beyond the totalizing claim of the Imperium that holds sway, whereby you dream creation, or you practice what would be a dreaming that both Indigenous and settler Australians, however you want to define them, would basically be co-creators too. Now that is inherently more totalizing in its potential, because ultimately it relates to the way how people act and the way how that they see themselves in the world, the way how that they would be a co-creator, the way how their significance of their actions, that their actions actually do create the world. And if they participate in a songline of their own dreaming, that dreaming is going to be connected to the place that's no longer going to be given as commercial, or given where you clear time as an economic good. So clear the form of life of the consumer in order to sanction reconciliation as a value add to a buyer's journey. So you could say what it does is it offsets the questioning of our existential status. Now this applies to every single person on the planet. It doesn't just apply to Australia, but you can use a ritual or see through it to the aspiration, but then the way how it gets maybe leveraged or kind of is pushed into a conduit that ultimately nullifies it of its potential. And so in that way you can look at why else was the voice offered? The voice was offered as a way people to invest in the spiritual aspiration or the aspiration of reconciliation, but then doesn't actually ask anything of the self that's given for people to then, vote for in a referendum. Because once again, if it's framed as political, you're not dealing with the spirituality of your actions and how, if you are taking reconciliation as in reference to the self or your actions as money making, the way that you can be orientated towards the land, the welcome that's given. Can you be orientated towards that land as just the totalizing claim of a buyer's journey or have a songline of a new creation? Now that's if the voice is only strengthening a buyer's journey, then obviously what it's doing, it's substituting for the way how people would be an active co-creators or participate in that. So you could say that it was designed to capitalise on what is an issue within Australia, but because it's framed through politics, it doesn't obviously go far enough. It doesn't implicate people or engage people in a way where they an active participant through creating beyond the credit instrument that they're given. In that case, you're credited that you're a citizen and you can vote. That's all that's asked of you. There's nothing else that's asked of you as far as that goes. You don't need to potentialize the way how that you would be orientated towards life, or really think of the spirituality or the question of your spirituality that drives your actions. And so the easiest way ultimately is that reconciliation or the rights of Indigenous peoples is always considered as a social justice issue. All right, the social is in reference to the relationality of the domain. So if people don't question how you relate to another person when you don't understand the way you produce yourself as a credit instrument, social justice that is just a value, and it's a value add to the buyer's journey that's been set for it. Literally, because you're not dealing with the question of justice, which is existentially grounded, which has got to do with the imperium, relates to the form of life of the consumer. This is, and so what it does is it substitutes. It doesn't question. It's religious. It doesn't question the nature of what's at play when a social justice is offered. It doesn't question the relationality. It doesn't question what you're capable of. If the only thing that's asked of you is to go to a rally and claim rights for Indigenous peoples, well, ultimately you take time out to do that. It doesn't question your existential status and this is the reason why people invest in these collective movements, because if it becomes a spiritual question, it's asking a question of the self. And that would be, like I said, because the imperium is got to do with the form of life that you inhabit, it applies to everybody equally. All right, you're all given in the same fucking way. All right, there's nobody that's first here. All right, there's nobody. You're all exactly the same. And so you could say that it's offered as it's like the return of investment in social justice becomes like offering the voice as a way of reconciliation. It becomes a way of welcome to country. But then that investment in and the return doesn't potentialize obviously actions that are predicated on discounting, because if the return is based upon the absencing of the creative self, how can you temporalize place? How can you be orientated towards place beyond the totalizing claim of a buyer's journey and introduce what the steps of an initiation or what would be a walkabout? And so therefore do justice to the spirituality of the land by understanding the nature of what you're dealing with when you're beholden to a no place. If you're only welcome in the way that's given for a buyer's journey, obviously you cannot temporalize place what would be a sacred kind of map of the land, as it were. How can you when it's just buyer's journeys? You're just all bound together. So people would be bound together. They'd collectivise themselves in a movement and claim kind of justice for Indigenous peoples because it's an issue of the social, and so the spiritual question is completely jettisoned. And so therefore that means to say that the binding of a buyer's journeys together allows the collective investment in it. And so you all feel that you're moving towards some kind of reconciliation, and yet as a result of that, you can outsource the question of your own existential status. You can outsource the question of your own actions that are money making, the fact that you are beholden to a way of life that seeks compensation for the outsourcing of creativity, or what would be the creativity that you could animate that would be part of a new dreaming story. And so this, if you look at along those lines, this gives you an indication that there is something that is occurring, but it's continuing to outsource the question that not only that applies to everyone on the planet. All right, it doesn't matter where you are, but you can look at the ritual and see what's percolating underneath it in a way where ultimately, if you were to orientate towards initiating creation, or potentializing your time beyond the economic good to temporalize place for a common surpassing. The temporalizing of place for a common surpassing would be that you, through your buyer's journey, you're introducing steps that would be a dreaming track. And so what you would have, this is the only way that you can reconcile this, is that you're set on a buyer's journey, and there will be steps that will then potentialize your step as a dreaming track. And when you're looking at the period of transition, that's what's going to be given to you. You have to think that this is the liminal situation that you're dealing with. You're dealing with the totalizing claim that's made on time. So how do you potential movement beyond what would immobilize? You have to potentialize steps. And then, and to walk. So what I call you straddle the divide. The straddling of the divide means to say that you got one foot placed in the no place, right? So you can never temporalize place because you're bound to unavowed transcendentalism. And then the other one is that you're actually connecting your foot to place, whereby it becomes a dreaming track. It literally is a footstep in a part of a new creation story, a songline, a dreaming track that you are walking, all right? That is orientated towards place as a common bequeathal, or a common surpassing of the no place that everybody is beholden to. And that's the way you do justice to reconciliation when you think of it as a spiritual issue.